If I was going to make one recommendation, I would say let's make sure that we're linking to our most important pages. Like, I understand that we can't link internally everywhere. All of the listeners, I'm sure, have 5 to 10 pages on our website that are really mission critical to our business's success. And the first thing I would do is look for opportunities to add internal links to those 5 or 10 pages that we really care about and matter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to invite Nate Matherson here to chat with us from Positional. What's up, Nate?
Hey, Vince, thank you so much for having me on this week's podcast.
Yeah, so Nate is the co-founder and CEO of Positional. You might see him on LinkedIn. He posts a lot of great stuff. He's very active. Highly recommend following Nate and the team. Nate, I think by the time this podcast goes live, Positional will have already launched, but I'm really excited for you guys building a tool from scratch. I want to get into all that, what that's and the strategy behind that. But before I do, I want to just throw out like a little icebreaker. I know you're a man of content out there in the business. What do you like? What have you seen lately? What's a really cool piece of content you've seen that's inspiring or super creative?
That's a good question. One came to the top of my mind immediately. You might have seen Glenn Alsop's recent report that he did on I think it was 12 brands that basically own Google search. He did this really interesting analysis of the 12 companies that own collectively like many hundreds of websites. And he found that they are totally dominating and owning the search results and often ranking multiple websites for the same keywords across many different SERPs. And that was probably the most interesting piece of content I've read lately. Nothing surprising to us SEOs who have, been in the affiliate space, for example, but Glenn put some really great data behind it. And that would be my favorite piece of content I've read lately.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll link to that in the show notes. I think I saw that actually from you tweeting about it first. Yeah, I love to see all those kind of visualizations that show you where everything comes from. I think I saw one about like major food brands once. It was really cool. Nate, let's get right into it. We talked about this before. You're running up against the clock here. The Positional launch is coming up. So I want to give you some runway here to talk a little bit about Positional and just tell us what Positional is and let the BuzzStream listeners know about it.
I appreciate you giving me a podium to tell the listeners more about what we've been building for the last 13 months. And I've wanted to start Positional since 2019. I've been doing SEO for most of the last 10 years, building large organic search channels for my own websites. And I've probably bought just about every SEO tool you can buy at some point or another. And there are a lot of SEO tools and content marketing tools on the market. But my co-founder, Matt, and I, the reason we started Positional was to do two things. And just for all the listeners, Positional is a content marketing and SEO tool. And the reason we started this company was because at all times, we were using like 5 or 6 different tools to do our job as content marketers and SEOs. And at the same time, like we had built a lot of tooling to serve some of the very specific problems we had that it was just not available on the market. And so even back in like 2019, Matt and I had thought like, hey, there's an opportunity for us to build, something in the SEO tooling space. It just ended up taking me 4 years until I was in the exact right position to do it. And so with Positional, like I mentioned, in some sense, we're trying to round up what is like a very fragmented tool space and give our customers and myself the tools we need to do our job. And included in that, like we've got tools for keyword research, tools for keyword clustering, tools for content optimization. But where I think Positional is quite unique is that we also have tools for heat mapping and content analytics. We have a buyer journeys product to help you map the different user flows that users are navigating through on your website. We've got a couple different tools for social media. And so we try to take you from like ideation or like keyword research to like ultimately like tracking user journeys and conversions across your website. And so we've tried to build that end-to-end tool set from idea to actual dollars and all in one workflow. So that way you're not having to switch from a keyword research tool to a keyword clustering tool and then to a content optimization tool and then to a plagiarism detection tool and then to an internal linking tool and then to a heat mapping tool. You can do all that in one workflow at Positional. And so it's just been so much fun building this tool set over the last 13 months.
Yeah, I think where we met, I got to trial. You walked me through some of the features and I was blown away by exactly what you said. Like it does do a great job of kind of pulling together a lot of these tools and workflows that you need separate apps for, just separate pieces of software for. So I'm really excited to see it in action once it fully goes live and see all the different types of features you're rolling out. One of the things that you said that popped out to me was this idea of like buyer journey. And I know this isn't exactly what we're setting out to talk about here, but I find right now, like Google Analytics obviously was at least ubiquitous in the industry, is the way to report on this kind of stuff. But since GA4 came out, like it's just been a total S show. Is Positional like a potential, are you positioning it to compete with GA4 or maybe give users an alternative way to better track and report on some of their like organic and tie that together to the conversion?
Yeah. And I started my career in the lead gen affiliate space. And so I spent 6-7 years essentially marketing consumer financial products. And so as like an affiliate lead gen person, like I was always so interested in like how consumers were navigating our site, how they were converting, where they weren't converting. And we spent so much time and energy trying to identify like those drop off points and those critical pages on our site that maybe are not as obvious, at least initially. And I agree with you. I think like Google Analytics 4, it's challenging. I think it's the right time to be building alternative tooling to a GA4. And I can't say that Positional is like a full blown replacement for GA4 today. Even something like what should be simple in Google Analytics, like customer journey mapping, is incredibly challenging, really hard to set up and hard to maintain. And so our pitch with our buyer journeys product is that it is an out of the box tool that gives you the insights you need without any sort of time spent actually configuring it, besides adding a small script to your site. And this is like a big step in this direction for us. We are launching our conversion tracking product pretty soon. And I think long term, we do want Positional to be a full blown replacement for something like a GA in the toolbox. I think we have a lot of work to get there, but that is one of our goals in the year ahead.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very exciting. Stepping back, so again, in that kind of trial, I think the reason I reached out to you, you had put out something on LinkedIn where it was like, hey, we have this tool. Here's what it does. If anyone's interested, reach out. And I think the specific post that you were talking about was analyzing internal links and like finding better ways to get internal links. And so for me, coming to BuzzStream when I did, there's already, I've never really been in a position where there was content written on a site to this extent. There were hundreds of articles, and being able to now in my role, level up kind of the organic search side of things. Internal linking was very important to me, and trying to understand like where to link to, and out of the box, like the only thing I really knew of was Link Whisper, and I've never really used it. So I was looking at alternatives, and Nate, you pulled up in my search there. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about the internal linking tool, then just get into internal linking in general. But so could you tell us a little bit more about Positional's internal linking tool?
Yeah. So our internal linking tool set is called Internals, and it's actually my favorite tool set in our toolbox because personally, I've spent hundreds of hours internally linking blog posts and pages together. At our first company, we had at one point something like 2,500 blog pages on our site. And when you're dealing with that size of a website, like internal linking becomes really challenging. Like when you publish new content, it takes a lot of time to go back to existing content and figure out how to internally link to it. It also even takes a lot of time to internally link from a new piece of content to an old piece of content. I'd always done cite my domain and then inserted the keyword I was trying to find to figure out like what page I could try to link to. And that would even take 15 or 20 minutes sometimes to internally link a new piece of content that we were about to publish. And so with our internals tool set, We've really built like two tools in one. We have a tool set for identifying missing internal links in your existing portfolio of content. And so for someone who's like coming to a new role where they might not know every page on that website that exists, like it can be helpful in terms of getting your bearings and finding a lot of opportunities very quickly, where like we could go back and we could add pretty targeted internal links across our website to other pages that we care about. But then it also works in like the new content creation process as well. So you'll give us the content and we'll use what we call our keyword approach to find internal linking suggestions where you could internally link to other pages that already exist on that site. So it's both before and after in terms of internal linking. And in my opinion, like internal linking is one of the least appreciated jobs in SEO. I think it's so important giving
Yes.
Google that context in terms of what your website is a good resource on, which pages you care about most. I think anchor text and how you use it when internally linking is really important and critical and can have a big impact. And I would say that like for the largest customers we work with, like they can often get pretty meaningful gains for certain pages or the entire site by just taking a hard look at internal links and like how they're using them without any new content or really any substantial content changes. And I would encourage like all SEOs at some point this year to take a hard look at our internal linking strategies.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. What are some best practices? Let's say from the content creation standpoint. So you're writing a new post. What are your kind of best practices for internal linking outwards? And then let's start there. Internal linking to other posts within your site.
Yeah, the older I've gotten, the more I listen to Google, and I know Google always says do what's best for the reader or do what is best for the searcher. And so I tend to approach internal linking from the perspective of what's best for the reader first. And so I think at a high level, like internal links are just helpful for navigation across your website. And so if there are opportunities in a piece of content to give a reader a much bigger piece of content on a related topic that we're referring to within another piece of content, I think that makes for a more helpful experience for that reader. And I think it's just generally helpful and important for them. But for Google, like internal links, I always like to say that internal links create like a connected spider web of tissue, especially for new websites that are just getting started. I think internal links are really helpful to show Google like what your website is a good source of information on and which pages you care about the most. And so, of course, you want to be internally linking to pages you care about on your site. And I think that sends an important signal to Google that this page is important and matters and it should rank. And Google also gets all of that surrounding context around the anchor and from the anchor itself to know better as to which keywords that page you are internally linking to should rank for. Another important thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to use the exact same anchor text on every single one of your internal links. A lot of people will exact match every single one of their internal links. And I think there's a place for exact matching. I read a really interesting report the other day from Cyrus Shepard, and he did an analysis of internal linking anchor text and the impact on rankings. And he found that we should be using exact match anchors. I think it was like 20-30% of the time on our internal links. But the pages that tend to perform best in search actually have quite a bit of variance in the anchors on those internal links. And so not only do we want to be doing exact match anchors, we want to be doing partial match anchors, we want to be doing random anchors. And it was even a little crazy. Cyrus found that we should even sprinkle some naked anchors in there too, or at least the pages that were performing best had those characteristics. So you'll want to keep anchor text in mind. A lot of SEOs will, they'll stress or they'll worry about like over internal linking. Like we don't want to be internally linking to like too many pages. As long as, in my opinion, you don't have a wall of hyperlinks, like the user isn't staring at all blue links, I think we're okay. Like you don't want to do anything that's like disruptive or distracting for the reader in terms of having too many internal links, but I'm not that worried about it in my personal opinion, as long as the UX UI isn't disruptive for a reader. I'm generally of the perspective that we should be internal linking whenever it is helpful for the reader. And if it's helpful, let's do it. I'm not worried about having too many internal links from a page to another page. Another area where I might disagree with a lot of SEOs in terms of internal linking is like cross-cluster internal linking. Like back in 2015, 2016, we heard a lot about like site silos and like hub and spoke. And you didn't want to internally link from one silo to another silo because it could confuse Google. And it blows my mind that SEOs are still thinking this way. Oh, we don't want to internally link one category to another category. No, I think that's just stupid. Like if it's a good opportunity for a reader, or it's helpful, I should say, for a reader to have that internal link in place, even though that internal link is going from one silo to another, like I say, we do it. I think you'd be stupid not to. So a controversial take, at least in some SEO circles. But last thing I'll say before I'll stop talking here, Vince, is you'll often hear too about like link sculpting, trying to shift like page authority, like strategically, and maybe not shifting page authority to certain URLs on your site. And I would say that like that it does make sense conceptually that like the more pages you internal link to, maybe the less page authority you're passing to them. But it's not something that I tend to worry that much about. I just want to be internally linking to my most important pages. And then also to like any pages on my website which have accumulated a lot of links to them from other sources. I want to make sure that from those pages, we are internally linking to the pages we care most about. So those were a few, tips, a couple controversial statements. Hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. For someone who's doing a internal link audit, you're seeing that there's not a lot of links to however many pages. Do you have a set number that you go with or recommend, 2 to 3, or is it really just you do what's natural?
In terms of the number of links pointing from a page, I don't have like a target in mind or like a minimum that I need to implement. But I had Ethan Smith from Graphite on my podcast, and he actually did a pretty interesting analysis in terms of the number of internal links that you want pointing to a given page on your site. And he found that with the clients they work with, that the optimal number of internal links pointing to a page on your site is 7 or more. And like the minimum for Google to really care is like 3, but 5 was twice as good as 3. But then 7 is where you really start to see that impact, at least in the research that he did. And so I don't know that we need to be internally linking exactly 7 times to all of the pages that we care about on our site, but it's clear in the research that Ethan did that the more times you're internally linking to a page, generally, the more powerful that signal is to Google and the better that page will actually perform in search.
Yeah, I'm really interested in those types of studies, like the number of internal links and the impact on ranking. And you mentioned Ethan Smith's reports. Are there any other types of reports? I think also what I'm getting at here is you decided to really push internal linking and create this internal linking tool. And you say that it is overlooked, and I totally agree. But it does seem so powerful. And I'm just really curious if I can help readers and listeners really, let's drive this point home and like, why is it so impactful?
Yeah, if I was going to make one recommendation, I would say let's make sure that we're linking to our most important pages. I understand that we can't link internally everywhere. All of the listeners, I'm sure, have 5 to 10 pages on our website that are really mission critical to our business's success. And the first thing I would do is look for opportunities to add internal links to those 5 or 10 pages that we really care about and matter. As far as driving the point home, like why it matters, I've seen from my own experience and anecdotally with our customers that you can often get like 10, 20% lifts in terms of traffic to given pages just by revamping and restructuring internal links to them. And that's without any new content. That's without any substantial content changes other than internal linking. And so you can certainly drive more traffic to a given page and your entire domain just by like refocusing on the internal linking structures across your site.
Yeah, I think about that for us at BuzzStream. It's like we have a lot of referring domains. A lot of them are just to the homepage or something like that, or branded key terms. But I think yeah, there's probably a lot of link equity kind of that we're missing out on and that you can push into some of these more important pages. So for the listeners, it's like thinking about your site in that regard. And you mentioned something I want to get into a little bit more of this like PageRank sculpting, link sculpting kind of thing. Is that so? Let's actually start there. So PageRank sculpting, you mentioned that it's maybe not something that you recommend, but there is like a piece of it, and it's just making sure that you're taking your most important pages and ensuring that there's links to that. But can you talk a little more generally about PageRank sculpting?
Yeah, I think simply put, my stance here is that if you've got pages on your website that you've built or accumulated a lot of links to, those pages are going to be the most impactful then to the pages you're internally linking to. And, and so I do think it is important on the pages where we have accumulated a lot of page rank that we are then passing that page rank via internal links to other pages on our site. I don't think that is to say, though, that we should remove an actually helpful internal link for a reader just for the sake of trying to shift page authority or page rank to another URL on our site. I think you'd be doing the reader a disservice in that scenario by like potentially removing an internal link for the sake of trying to manipulate page rank. And so that comes back to my stance of trying to do what's best for the reader. I've certainly heard through the grapevine that you've got companies like Red Ventures, which is a major player in a whole bunch of different categories, including consumer finance. They own properties like Bankrate, The Points Guy, creditcards.com, things like that. I've heard that they do have an internal tool, which is essentially like a page rank calculator. And you can use it to like dynamically like test and then make predictions in terms of how page rank shifts via internal links impact rankings. I've also heard that Expedia has a similar tool that they've built internally. And somebody I talked to there who used to work at Expedia like swore by it, that it was incredibly impactful for them. And so some SEOs will disagree with me on this. I just would say that you can get 90% of the way there by just at a high level, just remembering to internally link to the pages you care about from the pages that have the most authority on your site.
Yeah.
And last thing I'll say here is I've spent a lot of time in the affiliate marketing space, like it was often like very hard for us to build backlinks to like our money pages or our pages that we wanted to rank for certain head terms
It's like everybody.
because they were very emotional. Yes. And so we very actively went out and built links to like related relevant pages that were closely related to our money pages, knowing that we could then shift that authority to the pages we actually cared about with internal linking. And so from the backlink building standpoint and then to internal linking standpoint, I think all of this kind of works together.
Yeah. And that's a great segue into what I wanted to talk about too, is this idea of what do digital PRs and people who are a step removed from the SEO game, like what can they be learning about internal links? Because I know a lot of times you don't have control over the links that you get back. Oftentimes you pitch something and a journalist they might link to a specific post, or like maybe you get lucky and you pitch a category post or something, but like they link back to the homepage. What do digital PRs need to know about internal links and what are some best practices there?
Yeah, I do think digital PR is a great link building strategy. It's one that I've had a lot of success with in my career, doing surveys and studies related to the different topic spaces we were trying to rank in. Our methodology was always, let's create one of these pieces of content for digital PR. And then within that page that we're accumulating backlinks to, let's make sure that we're then internally linking over to the pages that we actually make money from with like relevant anchor text. And to go a little bit deeper, if we are trying to diversify the anchor text that we're using across our internal links, I would say that I would save those exact match anchors for the internal links that you are implementing on those pages that have the most authority on your site, or that you are building links to from a digital PR standpoint. I think you can use exact match anchors when internally linking from like a page that you've used for digital PR or link building to those other pages you care about. And then maybe it's through the rest of the website that we actually try to diversify our anchor text a little bit more.
Yeah, into more natural stuff. Yeah, I love that. When you ideated content, when you were with LendEDU, did it start from the target keyword or the target page and then went out? So if you wanted to get links to student loans or something like that, was that always the start of your content ideation?
So the way that we thought about it, at LendEDU, that's where I spent the first like 6 or 7 years of my career. And we started in student lending. That is what we did. But then we eventually added on like multiple different product lines to our website. So we had product lines for personal loans and home equity loans, and we got into insurance. And within insurance, there's many different categories. And for example, if we wanted to build out business line in homeowners insurance, like we knew like very quickly what those keywords we'd want to target in homeowners insurance were, and we'd go out and create non-digital PR related content to serve those keywords. But then we also knew that we had to build like topical relevance and topical authority like within those new categories or product lines that we were launching on our website. And so if we knew that we wanted to get into homeowners insurance, we would do that with content, but then we would also do that through digital PR. And so we would start with like the broad topic of homeowners insurance. And then we would every Friday, like me and a couple other guys from our team would have like our weekly idea session. Like we basically just locked ourselves in a room for an hour every Friday and just tried to come up with ideas. What we were seeing in the news, like what was relevant, keeping in mind the new product lines we wanted to get into. And we would say, what interesting data could we create or find that were related to this new topic category we were trying to build relevance in? And so in like homeowners insurance, for example, like we might have done like a survey of homeowners and asked them like how much they spent on their homeowners insurance this year versus last year, so that we could create like a data point on the cost increases of homeowners insurance this year, which is something that's happening today with inflation. And that could be an interesting like storyline, because like inflation is something that every reporter is talking about, or a lot of them are. And homeowners insurance is broadly applicable to a lot of Americans. And if we could tie together that theme of inflation and homeowners insurance and create an interesting report or narrative in that topic space, like that would be a piece of content that would go pretty viral and do well, like in the media. And the result would be that we would build a lot of backlinks to it. And then we would shift the authority that we built to that page, which was a survey or a report, onto the other pages on our site in which we cared about. And so absolutely, we tried to create content actively in the different categories that were important to us from a digital PR standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of starting at the target point and going from there. I feel like that's probably the best way that people can get those high quality, high authority, and relevant links, which seems to be what Google wants these days. I wanted to shift, probably my last question here is how different your link building strategy has been for you now. Like with Positional, you're a SaaS tool, SaaS business. Do you still do link building in the same way? Is it digital PR driven? What works for you these days?
Yeah, I just really don't have time for that much link building at Positional. Our site's doing well. Like it's on a nice trajectory, but I don't have the resources or bandwidth right now to like really spend as much time on link building as I want to. And so what we've been most focused on at Positional is just like building a great foundation of content on our site. So that way, like when we do have the resources to like pour fuel on the fire and invest a little bit more in digital PR or link building, we've got like a great foundation to then pour that fire on. But I'll look for select opportunities when they present themselves. Also, too, I would say our most effective link building strategy these days is an accidental one. It's actually through our podcast. And so given we have a weekly podcast, oftentimes these guests will link to the episodes from their websites. They'll oftentimes get shared in different newsletters. Different newsletters will then link to us. And so I wouldn't say that we're actively out there but trying to build backlinks, but we are just naturally earning backlinks through our podcast primarily right now.
Yeah, that's killer. How much traction do you get? Like you're on LinkedIn all the time. I feel like you have a really solid content strategy there. How much traction do you get from LinkedIn these days?
Yeah, LinkedIn, it's been an awesome channel for me over the last year. I knew I was onto something when I would go home for the holidays and like extended family would say, I see you on LinkedIn all the time. And I'm like, all right, it's working. Or like when I see my wife's friends and they're like, we see Nate on LinkedIn every single day. I'm like, okay, it must be working because people are starting to tell me about it. And I actually posted for 14 days straight the last 2 weeks. I had been posting like 2-3 times a week, but I decided to run an experiment and just see what would happen if I posted every day for 14 days. And my theory was that you would see like a drop in engagement if you're posting every day. That was my theory, at least, but that was not the case. I actually found that by posting every single day, it actually led to a lot more engagement and visibility, and trying to get back on that daily grind here pretty soon. But at a minimum, I post on LinkedIn like 2, 3, 4 times a week, every week. And it's just been so impactful for our business. Like we get a new customer from LinkedIn every single week. And it's one way in which a lot of people hear about us. I think when I look at like our lead sources, LinkedIn is, I think it's like our fourth most important customer acquisition source. And it's also free. It doesn't cost any money to post on LinkedIn, and you can do it as much as you want. And so as long as you have something interesting to say, it's free. And so when we're a small startup without like huge advertising budgets, and so we have to look towards those free channels. Maybe the last thing I'll say is LinkedIn is a little bit like SEO. Like it takes some time to get off the ground, and it's one of those channels that compounds over time. And so like the first 1,000 followers you get on LinkedIn, it's a lot harder to get those 1,000 followers than it is to go from 8,000 to 9,000 followers. That's actually very easy. And it's similar to SEO in the sense that it's going to feel like you're like shouting into the wind for 3 months, but then it starts to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm realizing some of that same stuff for myself. Is that something you recommend for founders or SaaS company kind of CEOs, like leadership to invest in?
I think it's important for anyone. You're just making yourself more valuable. Like whether you're an employee at a company or you're starting your own company. If you're starting your own company, like you're building a brand for yourself, and people like to buy products from people that like they think are saying intelligent things that resonate with them. And so for an early stage startup, it's a marketing channel, but it's also just a way to build relationships with a lot of people. And then that's why you and I are on this podcast today. But even for like employees who work at companies, I think by building yourself a brand on one of these channels, it's just going to make you then like a more valuable employee in your next role, because you have an audience that you can lean on. Maybe it's not applicable for all types of employment, but I would say that most of the listeners of this podcast are probably in marketing. And so if you can build yourself a brand within a marketing category, I think that is something like you're building equity in yourself that you can then take forward to whatever's next.
Yeah. And if you're talking about like guest posting, like getting natural guest placements and opportunities, like you're in a good spot if you can present yourself as a thought leader in the space. Like all the link builders listening, that's how you do it. That's how you get those natural guest posts. People will actually ask you to post on their site. You don't have to actually solicit a guest post. So Nate, I know you're a busy guy. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Like I said, by the time this is out, Positional will have launched officially. Nate, tell people, where can they find Positional? What do they do to sign up?
Yeah, Vince, thank you for having me on this podcast episode. It was so much fun. And for any listeners that are interested in learning more about Positional, you can check us out at positional.com. There is now, I assume, a sign up link. So if you want, you can get started and play around with our tool set. We've got a free trial, and I'd love to hear what you think. You can always email me at nate@positional.com with any feedback or questions about our tool set.
Yeah, please don't spam Nate. Don't send him your unrelated pitches. But he's just very open on email. Nate, yeah, thanks again so much. Good luck with the launch next week. Can't wait to see Positional in action.
Thanks, Vince. Take care.